Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Quite recently, I've had a very powerful but kind of weird revelation about belief and goals and being able to picture the life that you want. And it came from a role-playing game. For the past 2 years, my friends and I have been playing a game called Call of Cthulhu. And if you don't know what this is a role-playing game of supernatural horror where the characters are exposed to all kinds of horrible things and eventually kind of go mad if they're lucky. And my friend Anthony has been running this game for decades. He's really good at it. And recently he asked us, hey, so far, what have been the most scary and disturbing moments in the game? And I was really surprised by my answer. The moments in the game that were most disturbing for me weren't the moments of supernatural horror and monsters and all that kind of stuff. They were really, really mundane. Like swimming through a tunnel, I didn't know how long it was, hoping there was air on the other side. Or being in a dark sewer, completely pitch black, hearing noises and wondering what was coming towards me. Or discovering a friend of mine hiding underneath a desk at the scene of a massacre and realizing that this poor man had witnessed that. The unifying factor in all of these experiences that really disturbed me were that they felt real. These were things that could have happened in real life. I was able to picture them and imagine them very, very vividly as a result because I've experienced things like that. I've been held underwater as a kid, hoping I could make it back up to take a breath. I've been in the pitch blackness and been really freaked out. And I've felt empathy and sympathy for people that have undergone horrible things. So all of these things that felt real to me, that were able to disturb me the most, were things that I've had experience with in the past. Not so for the supernatural horrors. I could picture those, but it wasn't quite as vivid because I don't have any touchstones for those. Now, even though that's fascinating from a role-playing gamer's perspective, that got me thinking about real life. Because there's another area where I struggle with belief or being able to picture things, and that's with my goals. Now, I've been working on building something for myself, a creative business, a YouTube channel, developing incomes that would allow me to live life on my own terms. But to be honest, I have difficulty imagining that sometimes. Not the results. I've had glimpses of the results. I've had periods of my life where I had financial freedom and time freedom. So I don't have a problem imagining that quite vividly. But the path, the life of somebody who makes a living doing this, I have no experience with that, no touchstones. I don't even have friends that do this for a living. I have friends that are business people, but in much more conventional businesses. I've had side hustles and side businesses, and right now including music, which provides a non-insignificant portion of my income, but that's a lot different than the life I'm looking towards, and I have no touchstones for that whatsoever. So it becomes very hard for me to imagine and to picture. My only examples are strangers on the internet, and I really don't know them. But then I remembered something. 13 years ago, when I showed up in recovery and was in active addiction, I could not imagine having a life where I didn't use drugs any longer. I couldn't imagine the life I have now, where I was happy, where I didn't hate myself, where I was able to hold down a job, where I was able to show up for people when they needed me. I absolutely couldn't conceive of that. I have no way to envision it. Yeah, I'd lived a life like that, kind of like that before, but after getting high, trying to scrape myself back up, I couldn't picture it. I just showed up and did what people told me to do, even when I didn't feel like it, even when I couldn't believe in it or imagine that it was possible, and when I couldn't even really picture what that other life might look like. And the cool thing was, eventually I started collecting evidence. Originally, I kind of lived off the evidence of other people's lives. I could talk to them, so at least they weren't like strangers on the internet that were clean. And I started to collect my own evidence because the longer I stayed clean day after day, I started to see my life getting better. I was able to envision the life I was working towards because I was living it. And that's a huge difference. And now looking back, I know I can stay clean. I have rock solid evidence. I have rock solid proof that I can continue to do this for the rest of my life because I've done it, because I have a touchstone. So I can picture what it looks like down the road. Maybe not entirely, but I have a really good foundation. The same thing happened when my girlfriend Megan got sick in 2020 and eventually died of lung cancer during that year. I had no idea, I had no way to picture how I could handle that, but I lived it. I showed up day after day. And quite recently, in fact, a couple days ago, when Susan had a little episode and we had to rush her to the ER and see what was wrong, I had the experience with Megan's illness that I knew I could handle whatever came up. Unfortunately, right now, it looks like everything's fine. But I was able to do that because I was able to believe that I could handle it. I knew I could handle it when Susan had a problem because I'd lived it before. I'd created that evidence. So I feel rock solid in my ability to handle anything like that. So here's the point. We believe what we can imagine the most vividly, and we can most vividly imagine the things that we've already experienced or felt. That's why trauma sticks. That's why things like fear of rejection or fear of failure can feel so vivid, because we've experienced things like that before. But with certain goals, we don't have anything to compare them to in our history, so it's much harder for us to imagine them and believe in them. That's why calling yourself an entrepreneur or a creator or a business owner might feel fake. You might feel like an imposter, not because it's not true, not because it's impossible, but because your brain doesn't have a reference file for it. But here's the good news. You don't need perfect visualization. You don't need to believe in yourself like it's some magic spell. You just need to get into motion and stay in motion. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's how recovery worked for me. That's how I survived the loss with Megan. And that's how I'll build a business too and make the life that I want, by just staying in motion, even if I don't have this perfect belief or perfect visualization. That belief and that ability to visualize comes later. The motion is the most important thing. The action is the real magic. So if you've got a goal, whatever it is, that feels far away, that feels blurry, you just can't picture it, don't panic. You're not broken. You're just human. Keep showing up, keep building up evidence, and sooner or later your brain will show up and believe, because you've lived it. And one day you'll look back and say to yourself, I couldn't picture this life, but I built it anyway. And that doesn't require monsters or magic. It just takes tenacity. It just takes showing up one day at a time. If I can do it, you can certainly do it. So as always, I would love to hear your comments on this. This was something I found incredibly fascinating just from a role-playing perspective, but once I really made the connection to real life, it really kind of opened up a lot of ideas for me. And so I'd love to hear if you had experience like this, if you believe I'm full of crap. If you liked the video, go ahead and like it. If you want to see more like this, go ahead and subscribe. See you later, kids, and have a good one.